myself included, were calling for it. I mean, literally calling for a change at the offensive coordinator position. And it was mostly that the offensive coordinator, Ken Dorsey, was very predictable. He just, if we could kind of predict what was going to come up with his play calling, you know that the other defensive coordinators in the NFL were too. It was just something that needed to switch. That was a good call by Coach McDermott. Some people are calling for both of them to go. I don't believe that. But at a point within the season where you do make a drastic change, that was one that needed to be done, and it was done at the right time. And yes, it has shown results. I mean, the very first game they came back with, there was a variety, and it worked. I mean, and using the backs in different ways, throwing to the backs in different ways, throwing to different receivers besides just Stephon Diggs. And that's not always the offensive coordinator. Sometimes that's the quarterback. But you could see a general shift in philosophy. Joe Brady knows what he's doing, and he's bringing at least something different. So, yes, I was calling for it. I think it needed to be done. It happened, and I think that has been a positive change.
One of the things that you touched on that I want to kind of expand on and ask is McDermott. You mentioned that he made that change. Are we sure that he made that change? Is that something that he would solely have the ability to do, changing that coordinator, or is that something that do you think might have been being driven?
No, I don't. I think that those two guys came together. They're peas of a pod, peas of a Carolina pod, no less. They came together almost as a package. I think in the interview process, I think Sean McDermott said, yes, I would like to be the new head coach here at Buffalo, and I'd like to bring along Brandon Beane as our general manager. I think he's smart. I think he has great ideas. We think in sync. In fact, when I used to write for Bills Mafia, I called them McBean and Company. They were one brain, and I think they came together. I'm sure they talked it over. I'm sure they had many conversations outside of one Bills drive where they said, what do you think we should do? And they probably came to an agreement to do this together. But it's a head coach's call. It's a call that I think if I'm going to criticize Coach McDermott for a few things, one of them would be he's a little too loyal to his assistant coaches, and he's a little or a lot real slow in asking them to do things. He kind of would leave them alone. He let his coaches alone, and I was much too often hoping, hey, you got to go talk to that guy. You got to get on them. You got to do something different. You're the head coach. You need to tell the offensive coordinators to do something different if you feel that's what needs to be done. And I think a lot of times he just left his assistant coaches do their thing, and he was a little too loyal to their autonomy.
I think that you touch on letting them do their thing. And I think one of the things that's been really noticeable is the play, and not just the play, but the demeanor, energy of Josh Allen. There must have been something, whether it was the head coach in Josh or Ken Dorsey in Josh. I don't know if it's a personality thing, but there was the one scene that we saw on TV during, I believe it was the Jets game, where he comes off the field and he's like, drops a couple expletives, and I'm back. And we hadn't seen that since at least the Packers game the previous season. So I guess what I'm trying to ask you is, with Dorsey, how much of it was X and O's, and maybe personality is something that might have been affected as well?
It's absolutely something in coaching that you bring a package with you. It's not just what you have that's on the quarterback's wristband or in the quarterback's repertoire. You bring an attitude, and you bring direction. And you say, okay, this week we're going to up-tempo it, and next week we got a different team. We might do something different. But whether Ken Dorsey was in practices down on the field saying, okay, come on, gang, let's go, 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 there's a personality there behind every coach. And sometimes that bleeds into what goes on the field. I think with Brian Daboll, there was a different situation about, hey, we're gonna come in here and we got some trick plays and we're gonna go after them. Ken Dorsey, I think, was a little more reserved. I don't know yet who Joe Brady is, but from what I saw in the play calling, he's a guy that probably said to McBean and Company when they asked him to be the new offensive coordinator, I would have no doubt that he said, yeah, okay, but we're going to let Josh Allen Josh. We're going to bring Josh Allen back. That's got to be part of the picture because that's part of Buffalo winning offensive football.
One of the things you touched on a little while ago is one of my favorite topics is the Carolina connection. I'm going to kind of dive in, and we're going to probably be like minutes on this one. I do think it's really interesting I feel like we're trying, and whether it's Beane, McDermott, they're trying to relive the glory days of the Carolina Panthers circa 2015 or 16 when Cam Newton was their quarterback, won an MVP. They went to a Super Bowl, got beat by Von Miller and the Broncos at that point in time. We're not even going to talk about Von Miller today. That's for something down the road. But that loyalty of just bringing everybody here, whether it's been players, coaches, so many. Dorsey was on that staff. Brady came from that staff. Obviously, McDermott and Bean were in assistant roles on that particular staff. And, I don't know. One of the theories that I've had, big shout out to Rob Mullen, who has talked about this in detail in some of the stuff that he's contributed to the QKA Bills Backers Facebook group, is about that Carolina connection, mostly in kind of how they were designed with the 12 personnel that they've, under Dorsey, really were kind of ramming in, and it wasn't working. It looks like they're kind of getting back to it with different results with Brady. But I kind of wanted to talk about like the loyalty aspect and just whether, do you think that there comes a point where Bean and McDermott have to part ways? I guess, segueing into one of the things that Brady's success has shown over the past 2 weeks is that the offense can do its thing. It's back, for lack of a better term, and Josh is joshing again, as you said. So it puts more focus and emphasis on some of the things that are lacking right now, and that seemed to be the defense not being able to get off the field in key moments. I think you gave me a stat, and I'm putting you on the spot. How many games have the Bills been in over the past few years with a one-score differential in their record with that? Do you know what the specific amount is on that?
I don't, and I don't know if that was me, but we all sort of have that number in our heads. We all have that feeling of being there. That has come up a lot when fans are talking about Coach McDermott, and a reason why he should go is that feeling, especially late in these big games where the Bills grab the lead and there's only moments or seconds left, and somehow, what are you doing, head coach, to not let the game slip away again? But back to your initial point, coaches have systems and philosophies, and they often are raised in coaching systems and philosophies, whether that's really for McDermott, it's not just the Carolina connection, but it's the Philadelphia connection too, especially defensively. Mike Holmgren had a philosophy and a system up in Green Bay. Kansas City does. You have these trees of coaching staffs that come. And when you have success with a group, a coaching staff, and you want to build success somewhere else, you feel comfortable with some of these other assistant coaches. You saw this one young wide receivers coach who understands your philosophy, your system. So let's bring him in here, and maybe he can be the quarterback's coach or the offensive coordinator, because you get the system. You're not bringing in a guy that, okay, maybe he's successful offensively and he's dynamic, but he runs a different system that's not compatible with what we have. That said, that doesn't mean you just leave them alone and let them do their thing. If you're having game after game where the offensive coordinator is not getting the job done, you go talk to him and get him to change. If you have a defensive coordinator, I'm not sure the dynamics with Leslie Frazier, but something happened last year where Coach McDermott felt he wasn't comfortable with how things were done, and he wanted to do things in a different way. Now, I don't know if he couldn't find that right person to come in and do that for him and let him be the head coach, and why he has to do both. I know that's a big complaint with a lot of Bills followers, is that he's kind of burdened with things, being the head coach and the defensive coordinator. But they have staffs, they have systems, they are comfortable. They've obviously been comfortable with a lot of the personnel that's come from the Carolina Panthers, and that this isn't the only team that does that.
Now, one of the things that you said is you can go to that staffer and you can correct the problem, talk to them when there's an issue. What happens when that staffer is the head coach? Who talks to him?
That's the general manager. That's the guy who's obviously not only his general manager, that's his friend. They've been friends for a long time. And that Brandon, I don't know if he has or hasn't, but somebody does need to whisper in McDermott's ear if he hasn't been listening anywhere else. And he's often busy enough to where he's not listening to us, or some of these other podcasts and Bills Mafia and such. But somebody's got to be like, hey, this is what's happening. Where do you need help? What can we do to help you? And I would think, sometimes that's ownership, and you don't necessarily want that, as we've seen in some places, Dallas and some others.
Or Carolina right now.
Carolina right now, exactly. We'd like Bryce Young to run the ball more. Let's get some plays going there. And I see that did not come out, this weekend. That didn't happen at all. But you don't generally want your ownership to do it. I mean, it can be a word in the ear from an owner quietly, not in the papers, not on the radio, not on television. But I would say it's either Brandon Beane or maybe Mrs. McDermott.
Mrs. McDermott, yes. Mrs. McDermott, I would assume, has lots of pull. I mean, the one thing that's definitely come out of Buffalo, I think Tim Graham with The Athletic reported on it this week, saying that their sources close to the Pegulas that there is absolutely zero chance that they are going off of McDermott in this offseason. So you can put that right to bed. Hey, loyalty, consistency, as you know, we've both been Bills fans for a long time. We'll talk about how long here in a little bit. But continuity and consistency is definitely something that was lacking for a long time. We have it, and unless you've got somebody picked, you're not making that move.
And I don't think the Pegula family is that type of an owner. They're really not. Some fans would, I think, like them to be a little more in the office, but that's just not their personality, their style. I think they really like, and this is a word that's been used a lot in Bills Mafia and a lot this week and last. I think the Pegula family really liked the process. That's why McDermott was hired. That's why Brandon Beane was hired. They have a moral compass that wants teams to be positive in the community. They want them to be winners, but they want them to be positive in the community. They want the players to be positive role models, and you can do those things all at once. And so I think they like the process. They like the system that McBean and company brought in. And I think something much more drastic other than some down games and Bills fan disgruntledness, it's going to take more than that for him to go this season.
I would agree. I mean, you look at their other franchise and the troubles that they've had. Hopefully we don't live in the abyss that is the Sabres in where they've been in their lack of success. But, one of the things with the OC that was really, the head coach that's been really frustrating is just you touched on it, a lot of the decision making when it comes down to the end of the game. We were talking before we started about last night's Monday Night Football game, Jacksonville and Cincinnati, and the scenario and the way it's set up at the end of that game was almost identical to Buffalo and Philly, where Jacksonville ties the game up with, I think it was 26 seconds left on the clock. They kick off. Before they, when they ran out, Jacksonville could have been forced to run out and rush a field goal. They didn't. Cincinnati called a timeout. Zach Johnson called a timeout, and initially we were like, again, are they trying to freeze the kicker? No. They had one more after that. They weren't freezing the kicker. He was stopping the clock, so they had more time to do something if they ended up making it. They did. Kick off, they get the ball, 26 seconds left, and then what do? They run the offense out there, shotgun, handoff, draw play, ends up picking, I think, 15 to 18 yards, and they attempt to get into field goal range. It's the things like that as a fan, you're more of an analysis guy than I am, but as a fan, those are things that just don't pass the eye test or smell test as a fan, and it's frustrating. And again, they're not making any move laterally or off of McDermott, but it's like those things don't seem to be getting better. They continue to happen over and over again, and I guess we're just stuck.
It's amazing the difference between big picture and little picture. If we go back to the Philly game just before the first half, similar situation. I think you're making reference to of 24, 25 seconds left. Should we go and try to score? And this is a philosophy thing with coaches. And this is a criticism I will give Coach McDermott. I feel often like he's more worried about losing a game than he's excited about trying to win a game. Now, in hindsight, perspective is a picky thing. And if you look at that, where the Bills were, where the Eagles were just before halftime, got a lead, okay, you could extend it. But if you do something weird, Josh Allen, once in a while, and it's a pick six, now you come out in the second half with Philadelphia getting the ball, the momentum completely changes, and at that moment, Coach McD played it conservative and said, let's just go in with a lead. Okay, we can criticize that after the game. Yes, it's boring. But in the bigger picture, too, if we go back at the end of the game, and let's go to overtime with the Eagles, let's say the Eagles got the ball first, drove down the field just like they did on the Bills to win the game. Now Buffalo gets it. They have to score a touchdown, and Josh Allen throws that pass to nobody in the end zone with the wide open Gabe Davis, whoever's fault that was. The last 2 weeks are not about a loss because of Coach McDermott. It's about the offense now. It's not about the defense. And it's just a reversal of fortune. If James Cook had caught that wheel route that was in his hands, this would be a completely different thing. If the Bills had beat the Eagles, but there are so many other things. But the thing that keeps happening is this last minute the defense gives up the score to lose, and that's why that's piling on Coach McDermott. But if you switch just a couple other things around that James Cook passed that he would have scored a touchdown on, Davis and Allen being more in sync on the play, they win. Philadelphia would have lost to Kansas City, Buffalo, 49ers, and have Dallas this week. They'd be on a stretch that's going somewhere different. The Bills would have beaten the Eagles in Philadelphia in the rain, and going into Kansas City would be a completely different picture. But it's a timing of things, and unfortunately for Coach McDermott, we've seen too many of these last minute, the defense gives it up. And it is partially his fault. His not blitzing, his dropping back into deep coverage is part of the problem, but that's the little thing compared to the big picture.
I think you nailed it in the sense that that falls on him. And I think a nice segue into the Kansas City game is the last time they were able to get off the field in a consequential moment was the last time they played Kansas City. And that was exactly why we brought Von Miller in. That was what the process was supposed to look like. Obviously, injuries, you got Trey White's out, you got Milano. I mean, we're a mash unit at this point in time. But they are aggressive throughout games. They are. And it just seems like they could easily have lost the Tampa game, the Giant game. They obviously lost in the last minute. Really, they could have won that Jets game. There are just so many things, and those are the things that just stick out as a fan to me. And I think, transitioning into like kind of looking forward to Kansas City this upcoming week is, can we get back there? These two teams know each other so well. You want to talk about consequential games. They've played some of the biggest games against each other, seemingly always at Arrowhead. Always at Arrowhead. And I know that the scheduling, powers that be, it makes sense. It's frustrating. Obviously taking a look, one of the other things we were talking about before this started is everybody looks beatable. San Francisco, after their performance on Sunday night, just throttling the Eagles, looks unbeatable. But they had a 3-game losing streak earlier in the year. Philadelphia now looks beatable. To us last week, they looked like they were unbeatable. Kansas City is definitely beatable. They got beat the other night. One of the frustrating things is, I think, as a fan, is all these elite quarterbacks, with Trevor Lawrence going down, Mahomes looks beatable, Burrows is out. It's all right there before them, and it has to start Sunday. What do you expect to see this Sunday that's either different, or what do you expect them to do or think they need to do to win this one?
Having a game against Kansas City Chiefs in Buffalo would be nice. You mentioned that. I mean, we play the Kansas City Chiefs every year, usually twice because of the playoffs, most years. But we play the Chiefs every year because we have been ending up in first place in the division. The Chiefs have been ending up in first place in the division. Every AFC team that wins the division plays every other division winner every year. That's how that goes. But, boy, it does seem like one of those games should end up in Buffalo somehow. But to your point, they've got to go in as if this is the playoffs. If they lose this game, they're below 500. And yes, it seems like so many of the other leading teams of the AFC are trying to give it away too. We aren't the only fan base that appears like they're just giving away games. I asked Jacksonville fans this morning and Kansas City fans this weekend. It's just amazing. But they've got to treat this like a playoff game. They've got to go forward. I think they could possibly still lose. They could go 1-1 between Kansas City and the Cowboys, but I think they've got to win both these games and then go into those final 3 easier games. I want to say easier, but who've the Bills been losing to? That's the other big picture thing here is we would not have been as furious after losing to the Eagles if we hadn't already lost to the Jets and the Patriots and the Jaguars and almost the Giants and lost to Denver. If we hadn't lost those games that we absolutely should not have lost, I say we, the Bills. But if we had won those games like we should have and gone into Philadelphia on a Monday night in the rain and played an overtime game and come away with a loss, we would be a very different attitude right now. But we're angry and we're frustrated because of those losses. Now, hopefully, those early losses to those poor teams are because the offensive coordinator wouldn't change things up and wouldn't go adventurous to ensure the lead. Hopefully it's not Coach McD saying, let's sit on it. I think they've got to be aggressive. The offense has to look like they did in Philadelphia. The defense has to look like they did in the first half against Philadelphia. And if you go into Kansas City this week and do that, the Chiefs are very beatable. We've seen ways that they can get beat. but they went in and beat Philadelphia too a couple weeks ago. So we don't know which Kansas City team will show up, but we can't worry about that. Coach McDermott has to say to the team, all breaks are off. You've had your break, your Week 13 bye, which, by the way, we had talked at the beginning of the season about how this was possibly the year for the Bills. Nobody's really talking about it. This could be it. And one of the reasons was they were having a Week 13 bye instead of a Week 5 bye. You know, it was perfect timing. And it is. It was perfect timing to get them to regroup. Hopefully they can come out of it, but they've got to go into it thinking this is the playoffs.
Well, let's wrap up the Kansas City talk. What's your prediction for the game on Sunday?
I see the Bills coming out being aggressive, Josh Allen putting his Superman cape on when he needs to, but them working on getting first downs and ball protection, which is vital. Kansas City has a good defense, very good defense. So, but it's not a defense that the Bills can't score on, can't move the ball on. Green Bay showed that. There's a little bit to watch there. We've also, now, offensively, Kansas City isn't bringing a lot. They're not the offensive juggernaut that they have been over the last few years. So this is a team that's beatable, and I think they just have to go and be aggressive, including Coach McDermott.
What do you got for a score?
I see both teams scoring well. Now, let's take a look at the weather. If the wind gets building up, it's not rain that usually does it in NFL games. It's big winds, and I think some of the venues this weekend are going to have some of these big windy games. Scoring's going to be down a little bit. If the wind picks up real high, that can have an effect on things because the Bills will need to pass and run. But if the wind is decent, I think this is a high-scoring game. I see something like I'll go with Bills 28, Chiefs 21.
28-21. I'm like right there with, I think, I'm going Buffalo 24, Chiefs 16. That's where I'm at. Because Kansas City over the last few weeks has had a lot of trouble scoring. And one of the things that, my take going into this game is we're going to get one of two Chiefs. We're going to get you mentioned the Bills need to be angry. The Chiefs are coming off of a really bad stretch. Yeah. They could also be playing angry. Do we get that team and we get rejuvenated Mahomes? Maybe Travis Kelce gets some alone time with Taylor and gets his woes righted as well. Or do we get the wounded, kind of like resigned Chiefs? And I just don't see that happening. So I'm going 24-16 Buffalo. So, kind of moving off of the upcoming game and kind of looking big picture to the rest of the season. One of the things that I heard somebody else do this morning that I thought was interesting is looking at some of the teams that are in the hunt or, that are already slotted for the playoffs in the AFC, kind of we're on the outside looking in. The win last night by Cincinnati does not help us at all. But you have Houston with an injured, wide receiver. Does Stroud still look as good as he does? Pittsburgh, their quarterback also, is injured. I believe an ankle injury. Lots of ankles, Achilles and ankles. And then you've got one of my favorite players, and I almost hope these guys make the playoffs, is the Indianapolis Colts and Gardner Minshew. I don't know if anybody has seen the video of him when he was with Jacksonville and he got into a start and he got off the plane and he was wearing the flyest disco shirt. I don't even know what it is, but I fell in love with that dude that day. And I almost hope that they make it. I would love to see them, whether it's a trip to Indy or them to come here. We always seem to have good playoff games with them. So I guess looking, if the Bills get in, who do you think, if you were to put three teams in, who do you think they are based on what the scenario looks like right now?
Which three teams are?
Who do you think are going to make the playoffs?
As much as I think,
wild card. I mean, I figure let's let's basically resign that we're going to lose the division to the Dolphins.
Even though we're going to beat the Dolphins on the last game of the season.
Hypothetical. They win the division. We got to win a wild card to get in. What are the three teams that you think, maybe you don't think we're going to make it, what three teams do you think, end up in as kind of that wild card?
I do think the Bills can make it because I do think they can get their act together and play how they need to play, and they will need some help. But boy, are these other teams delivering up the help. I mean, they're just laying their own eggs. Pittsburgh seems to have lucked their way to a nice schedule somehow, and now with Mitch Trubisky going forward, they're hurting. I thought for a minute Cincinnati really destroyed my Joe Burrow for MVP choice this year because when he wasn't on the field, they weren't good, and when he came back, they were unbeatable. And boy, they proved me wrong last night. So got to be careful with them. I think Houston has a great coaching situation going on. They've got a great atmosphere down there, and they're doing many things. And they seem that when one person goes down, they find another way. They're being very well coached. So I think I'd like to see them. Indianapolis scares me because they just somehow win. They shouldn't win some games, and they somehow do.
And they run the ball. They're built for the playoffs.
Yeah, in the playoffs when they come back, Jonathan Taylor will be back by then. Zach Moss, former Buffalo Bill, is being allowed to run like the Bills hoped he would be able to now with an offensive line that helps him. I don't think it's – Denver's coming back and has looked well, but I don't think it's anybody from the AFC West.
So no Denver.
Possibly,
Okay.
But it's so hard to predict. I mean, you cannot look, and I'm sure so many Bills fans have done this already. You start looking at the schedules of these other AFC teams, and is there any one of these teams where you can look and comfortably go, oh, yeah, they're going to win 4 of the next 5. Oh, yeah, they're going to lose 4 of the next 5. I can't do that.
You're right. I think that there's going to be.
So many years we can, but
I think there are going to be teams that we just talked about, whether it's Cincinnati, who's kind of like right in the thick of it now. Actually, they're ahead of us. There's teams that are probably going to go 1-4, or 2-3, and I could totally see Buffalo going on a run and doing it. So, lots of fun stuff to kind of look forward to with the Bills wrapping up the season, and we can talk forever. So we're going to kind of like start wrapping it up. But before we do, I kind of wanted to, make it a little bit lighter, less analysis, more personal stuff. So one of the questions that I told Rick I was going to ask him is, what was the first Buffalo Bills game you ever went to?
I remember, and this would have been the age of the War Memorial, The Rock, but I did not go there. I do remember my father getting on Elks Club bus trips to a couple of those games. But I remember my father walking in off the front porch holding the Corning Leader newspaper, and he said, Rick, we're Bills fans now. I said, yeah, why? And he showed me the headline, and it said, Bills draft Heisman Trophy winner, O.J. Simpson. That's how old I am. So we became fans, but the very first year of the Rich Stadium, my family and another family went together, and it was Bills versus Cincinnati Bengals. And I remember the Bengals, I think it was Ken Anderson, hit Bob Trumpy, the tight end, to beat the Bills. But that was my first game. But the whole experience from getting up and going to a breakfast somewhere and the whole tailgating parking lot experience to just being just dumbfounded as an 11-year-old, I think, walking into a professional football field and seeing when you walk through those opening gates down into the tunnel that you walk to your section and realize that field is so much closer than on TV, and it's so green, and that whole experience. And I was at a lot of the good early games where they took down the goalposts to go to one of their first
1980?
Is
that the
Raiders
Dolphins?
or Rams,
Okay.
I forgot,
Okay.
you know. And the whole Buffalo's Got a Feeling, Talking Proud song that used to play after those touchdowns before the Shout song came along. Those were some of my early Bills experiences. And you?
My first Bills game was 1987. It wasn't until I was a little bit older that I actually realized my first Bills game was Jim Kelly's first home game.
Nice.
They played the Jets, and I believe it was in September of 1987. They lost to the Jets, but that was my first. I was 12, and it was just kind of cool. Like, you know, my dad was always a Bills fan, and he did go to games at the old War Memorial Rock Pile. Funny story, I actually met a gentleman at a wedding I was DJing about a month ago who played for the Patriots. He was a retired NFL player, and he played for the Patriots, and he was reliving, we were talking, I told him I was a Bills fan, and he was talking about a game and from a player's perspective, and I'm like, wow, that sounds a lot like the game that my dad said that he attended. I mean, they're literally grilling in the parking, or not even the parking lot, they're grilling in the stands, glass bottles, because he was talking about getting hit with glass bottles like while they're on the bench.
I was at the Chuck Foreman snowball game.
Yeah.
That was one of my early ones.
And it just was, interesting to see that perspective. But kind of going, full circle is first game as an adult that I bought tickets for that I ended up taking my dad to a game, ended up being the Jacksonville game where Kelly got injured, playoff game, and that ended up being his last game. So he, as a kid, took me to my first game, Jim Kelly's first game when I was 12, and, back early 20s was able to take my dad to, his last game. And then when he got enshrined in Canton, we both drove out together and shed a tear. That was definitely a really special moment.
I shed tears being able, when I got my first job, to be able to buy my father. I was able to hook up with somebody in Bath for the first series of playoff tickets for the run to the Super Bowl. So I bought my dad playoff tickets for that, and that was our Christmas present for him. So that got a little teary too. And of course, that first game was the blowout against the Raiders, 53-3, 50 something like that. Yeah. So there was a lot of here comes that song again, So we had a good time with that.
That's awesome. Yeah, want to thank everyone for joining us. Rick, I want to thank you for sitting down with me and talking Bills. Hopefully we do this regularly. Yes, we're both enjoying our Laurentide beer company. You can't sleep on the Penyan Light. It's great. What did you say you had again?
The Amber, it's a German. I wish I grabbed the name before I came. I will next time. This is our first time learning.
Me too. It's our first, it's obviously your first watching us. We want to find out what your first Bills game was. So go down into the comment section and, share a story, because one of the things that we'd like to do in the future is read comments. Once we get a little bit more experience and I know what the hell I'm doing, we'll open it up and take comments from you. And if you'd like to join us on one of these, send us a message. We'd love to do that. So, Rick, I want to thank you for sitting down with me. Everyone out there, want to thank you for checking in and seeing us. We'll also be putting this back up on YouTube here in the next few days. So check out all of the stuff that we have going on. And make sure to join us at one of our upcoming watch parties. The QKA Bills Backers Facebook group, that you can join that. Has all sorts of information and lets you know what's going on, when things are happening, and all the really cool things like the Wheel of Awesome that we have. And just really great to get involved with the parties. They're super fun, and a lot of the funds that we raise with different things goes to the Yates Humane Society, so it's for a good cause as well. Lots of things coming up, so join us. Want to thank Tracy and Marla and the staff here at Laurentide Beer Company for allowing us to sit in the back room. It's awesome. The beer is great. Food is amazing too. So join us and have some of that. So please like, comment, and share. Thanks for hopping on and watching us, and we will see you next time.
Go Bills.
Go Bills. And I think that's a wrap.